A political earthquake has just rocked Westminster. The Supreme Court has ruled, unanimously and without mercy, against Keir Starmer's secretive attempt to drag Britain back under Brussels rule. This isn't just a legal loss, this is a total political takedown. Starmer didn't just cross the line, he erased it. And now the entire country is watching as the Prime Minister's hidden EU strategy crumbles in full view. The question isn't whether Starmer survives this, it's whether the Labour Party can survive the fallout. The ruling came like a thunderclap, swift and unforgiving. All 11 justices of the UK Supreme Court delivered a unanimous verdict. The Starmer government acted unlawfully when it attempted to bypass Parliament and quietly realign Britain with key EU regulatory frameworks. This wasn't a mere technical dispute, it was a decisive and scathing rebuke. The court accused the government of violating constitutional norms and subverting democratic principles. In doing so, they have shattered any illusion that Keir Starmer's leadership was grounded in transparency or accountability. According to legal documents now made public, the court found that Starmer's ministers had engaged in covert diplomatic engagements with EU officials for over a year, laying the groundwork for sweeping regulatory changes that would have realigned UK law with European standards. None of this was debated in Parliament, none of it was disclosed to the British public, and most crucially, none of it had legal standing. This ruling has ignited an inferno in the heart of Westminster. Inside Labour HQ, panic has replaced strategy. MPs who campaigned on respecting Brexit are now being forced to answer for a policy they were never told about. According to leaked emails and internal memos, Starmer's top advisors referred to the secretive policy as regulatory cooperation, deliberately using vague and sterile language to mask the true intent: legal convergence with Brussels, without triggering political alarms. One insider described the plan as a silent pivot to Europe, an effort to reverse Brexit not through public debate, but through quiet administrative shifts embedded within trade talks and regulatory agency proposals. The court saw through the smoke and mirrors. In a blistering section of their ruling, the justices called the government's legal argument intellectually dishonest and accused ministers of attempting to govern by stealth. For the Prime Minister, this is nothing short of a public unmasking. The man who stood on stages and promised a clean break from the past has now been caught red-handed, engineering what critics are calling a constitutional ambush. In fact, the court found that Starmer's team had already signed multiple framework agreements with European counterparts, binding the UK to regulatory paths that mimic EU law. None of these agreements were ratified by Parliament. None were even disclosed. And yet, civil servants were already drafting domestic legislation to implement them. According to one senior civil service source, the instructions were clear: keep it quiet, move fast, and don't ask questions. That instruction has now detonated in Starmer's face. The political backlash is snowballing. Nigel Farage was first to respond, calling the ruling a triumph for British democracy and accusing Starmer of running a rejoinder coup in plain sight. Reform UK issued an emergency press release demanding Starmer's resignation and branding his actions a betrayal of the people and the Constitution. The Tories, sensing blood in the water, have unleashed a full-scale offensive. Conservative MPs flooded social media and airwaves with one message: Starmer lied. The court confirmed it. Even Rishi Sunak, struggling with his own party's internal divisions, found a moment of unity in denouncing what he called the most brazen assault on parliamentary sovereignty in modern history. But perhaps the most devastating blows are coming from within Labour itself. Furious backbenchers are demanding answers. Several MPs have anonymously told journalists that they were used as pawns to win pro-Brexit seats, only to discover that the leadership had been working behind their backs to undermine the very policies they campaigned on. Some are now calling for an emergency meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party, while others are reportedly preparing letters of no confidence. One MP from a Leave-voting northern seat said, "I feel sick. This isn't what I signed up for." He's destroyed trust, not just with voters, but within his own party. As for the British public, outrage is spreading fast. Protesters have begun gathering outside Parliament. Calls for a snap election are echoing across the country. Petitions demanding Starmer's resignation are gaining thousands of signatures by the hour. The media is in a frenzy. Every headline screams betrayal. Every political programme is leading with the same question: how did this happen? And more urgently, how much more haven't we been told? The court's ruling has triggered a constitutional shockwave. Legal scholars are already declaring it a landmark moment, comparable to the prorogation crisis under Boris Johnson. But where that ruling stopped a temporary suspension of Parliament, This judgment has torpedoed a sitting Prime Minister's entire foreign strategy. The court has not only stripped Starmer of legal authority over the EU alignment plan, it has also publicly exposed him as a leader willing to deceive both Parliament and the people to get his way. And this is only the beginning, because what the court's judgment didn't answer, what remains hanging over every press conference, every Labour HQ meeting, and every MP's inbox, is this: who else knew? How far did the deception go? And if Starmer was willing to risk everything to push this through in secret, what else is he hiding? The reverberations of the Supreme Court's ruling have sent Parliament into absolute disarray. What was already a tense political climate has now been thrust into a full-blown crisis of leadership and trust. Inside Downing Street, the Prime Minister's aides are reportedly in emergency lockdown mode, scrambling to contain the damage. Phones are ringing non-stop, cabinet ministers are avoiding the press, and security has been heightened outside government buildings amid rising public anger. Labour's spin machine is in overdrive, attempting to downplay the scale of the scandal by insisting the EU regulatory discussions were exploratory and non-binding. But the legal judgment makes that line laughable. The court explicitly ruled that the government acted beyond its lawful powers, a phrase which, in constitutional terms, is devastating. It's not merely an overstep, it's a declaration that the government behaved as if the law didn't apply to it. More damning still is the emerging paper trail. Documents obtained by whistleblowers are starting to surface, including one internal memo marked Top Secret that outlines a 5-phase plan to reconverge UK legislation with core EU directives by mid-2026. This document, drafted months before the last general election, directly contradicts Starmer's repeated pledges that Labour would not seek to reverse Brexit. The wording is unambiguous. It speaks of restoring mutual legal standards with European counterparts in trade, agriculture, data protection, and environmental law. These are not casual discussions. This is legislative colonisation through the back door, and the people who voted to reclaim sovereignty in 2016 are seeing their will trampled in secret. The court's findings confirm what many suspected, but few could prove, that Starmer's government was quietly and systematically rewriting the Brexit settlement without a mandate. The justices even referenced the fact that government officials had used private, unminuted channels to communicate with Brussels regulators, meaning there are no official records of what was promised, proposed, or agreed upon. This level of secrecy is not just unusual, it's unprecedented. Former constitutional lawyers have warned that such behaviour teeters on the edge of unlawful governance. Lord Sumption, a former Supreme Court judge, commented publicly that Starmer's actions, if confirmed, represent a constitutional defiance of the highest order. Coming from a figure of such legal stature, that's a condemnation that carries weight. Meanwhile, trust in government is collapsing in real time. Multiple recent polls show public confidence in Starmer plunging. In just 48 hours, Labour's lead over Reform UK has been halved. The Reform Party's call for a general election is gaining traction, not just among their base, but across traditional Tory and even Labour lines. An Ipsos poll released this morning shows that 62% of voters believe Starmer should resign if it is proven he misled Parliament about the EU negotiations. In fact, a staggering 71% said they felt betrayed upon learning about the Supreme Court ruling. Across social media, the hashtag NextEUGate is trending nationwide. Protest groups are forming coalitions to hold public rallies demanding accountability, while right-leaning commentators are comparing the moment to Watergate in its potential to unravel a Prime Minister's authority. The betrayal cuts even deeper in the north of England, where traditional Labour voters, many of whom backed Brexit, feel duped. MPs representing constituencies like Doncaster, Stoke-on-Trent and Sunderland are facing fierce backlash. Town hall meetings have turned into shouting matches. Constituency offices are being flooded with angry letters and phone calls. One MP was heckled while attending a local event, accused by constituents of selling out their vote for EU loyalty. These communities, once the backbone of Labour's working class support, now feel completely alienated. And with the court's judgment shining a harsh light on the duplicity, there's no easy route back to trust. Inside the Labour Party itself, fractures are turning into full-blown mutiny. Shadow cabinet members are distancing themselves from the Prime Minister's office, with several reportedly refusing to appear on media interviews. Anonymous briefings suggest that some Labour MPs are discussing whether to challenge Starmer's leadership if he refuses to come clean. Momentum, the grassroots movement that helped elevate Corbyn, is now openly calling for transparency and accountability from Starmer, a veiled but unmistakable threat. And while no leadership challenge has been formally triggered yet, the pressure is mounting by the hour. A senior Labour strategist privately admitted to journalists, "The ship's taking water fast. If he doesn't plug the leak, we'll have to find someone who will." Internationally, the fallout is being watched with shock and confusion. EU officials are reportedly furious that their discussions with the UK government have been dragged into a constitutional crisis. One diplomat described the situation as toxic, warning that the scandal could sour future relations for years. European media outlets are reporting the story with disbelief, highlighting the irony that a British Prime Minister is now being accused of attempting to rejoin aspects of the EU in secret, despite Brexit being the defining political rupture of the last decade. American political commentators have also taken note, with one analyst on CNN stating bluntly, "If this happened in Washington, the calls for impeachment would be deafening." Perhaps the most disturbing development, however, is the suggestion that civil servants were instructed to delete records and minimise traceability. Whistleblower testimonies submitted to the court mention emails being marked for auto-delete, meetings conducted off-record, and briefings held in person to avoid documentation. One senior civil servant claimed, "The atmosphere felt more like espionage than governance." If proven, this could push the scandal into the realm of criminal investigation. The UK Information Commissioner's Office has already indicated it will be opening a formal inquiry into potential violations of data handling and government transparency laws. As the crisis deepens, Starmer's silence is becoming deafening. Apart from a carefully worded statement claiming he respects the court's decision and remains committed to a sovereign UK, he has avoided direct questions. He has not addressed Parliament, he has not explained why these covert agreements were made, and he certainly hasn't admitted any wrongdoing. But with legal experts, opposition leaders, his own MPs, and now the public demanding full disclosure, the time for silence may be running out. The opposition benches are sharpening their knives. Reform UK is surging in the polls, and Britain is watching closely, wondering how a Prime Minister who promised to heal the country has managed, instead, to divide it more deeply than ever before. As the scandal unfolds, the corridors of Westminster are beginning to echo with whispers of something much darker, a premeditated cover-up, reaching the highest levels of Starmer's administration. Leaked communications between senior advisers suggest that not only was the Prime Minister aware of the secret EU plan, but he also personally approved a strategy to gradually soften the public narrative around Brexit, reintroducing EU-aligned policies under innocuous-sounding domestic initiatives. One damning email from a senior policy advisor stated, "Begin re-implementation through non-binding resolutions, then shift to statutory language once public fatigue sets in." The very idea that this level of manipulation was being discussed behind closed doors has left many questioning whether democracy is still functioning as it should. The most shocking aspect is the coordination between Starmer's inner circle and foreign EU officials. Sources inside the Foreign Office have revealed that there were at least 4 meetings with unnamed EU legal advisers held in neutral European cities, Lisbon, Brussels, and Vienna, over the past 18 months. These meetings were not recorded in the official Foreign Office meeting logs. No minutes were taken, and yet they reportedly resulted in draft framework documents outlining how Britain could adopt harmonised legal standards in key sectors, especially data protection, environmental regulation, and food safety, all without requiring a formal referendum or parliamentary vote. Essentially, it was Brexit reversal by stealth. To those who believed in Brexit, not as a political stunt, but as a matter of national sovereignty, this has been an unforgivable betrayal. The promise of taking back control is being hollowed out in plain sight, replaced with shadowy deals and legal trickery. The Supreme Court's verdict may have stopped the scheme in its tracks for now, but the damage to public trust is already catastrophic. Nigel Farage, in a scathing address, called the revelations the most treasonous political episode in modern British history, warning that if the plot had not been exposed, the UK would be back under EU rule in all but name by the next election. Reform UK is capitalising on this wave of discontent, promising not only to defend Brexit, but to launch a full inquiry into how deep this deception really goes. Meanwhile, the Tory party is experiencing its own internal upheaval. Former Prime Ministers have broken ranks, with one openly stating that Starmer's actions undermine the very foundation of our parliamentary democracy. Senior Conservative MPs are calling for an emergency debate to be held in the Commons, not only to censure Starmer, but to consider legislative protections against any future attempts to bypass Parliament in this manner. There are growing calls for the triggering of a constitutional review, with one legal expert noting that this situation exposes a gaping loophole. Executive power can still operate in near total secrecy, if not sufficiently checked by Parliament and the courts. The result, as we're witnessing, is a democratic crisis of the highest magnitude. Even the monarchy has reportedly taken notice. While Buckingham Palace remains officially silent, insiders suggest King Charles has been briefed extensively on the situation, particularly the constitutional ramifications. Some royal commentators have floated the possibility of the king issuing a public statement or quiet intervention if the crisis spirals further, something rarely done but not without precedent in extreme national moments. The constitutional equilibrium between Crown, Parliament and judiciary is delicate, and with the Supreme Court striking down the Prime Minister's actions, the entire balance is being tested, like never before in modern memory. As pressure mounts, civil unrest is beginning to stir. In cities across the UK, protest groups have spontaneously emerged, not organised by political parties, but by angry citizens. Demonstrations in Birmingham, Sheffield and Newcastle have drawn thousands demanding Starmer's resignation. Signs bearing slogans like "Stop the EU betrayal," "Protect our sovereignty," and "We voted leave, respect it," dominate the streets. Protesters, many of whom are not affiliated with any political party, are unified by a common outrage that their democratic will was deliberately circumvented. Security services have been put on high alert, with the Metropolitan Police confirming that additional officers have been deployed to monitor unrest around Parliament. Journalists, too, are digging deeper into the scandal, and what they're finding is painting a grim picture. Investigative reports from both right-leaning and centrist outlets are uncovering how taxpayer money was allegedly used to fund quiet lobbying efforts with pro-EU think tanks and foreign legal consultants. One whistleblower from inside the Cabinet Office revealed that nearly £12 million was allocated over 2 years to strategic EU alignment frameworks, funds which were never scrutinised or publicly disclosed. The question now being asked is, how many other departments were involved? Was this an isolated scheme, or was it part of a broader, systematic programme to unravel Brexit one regulation at a time? Starmer's own MPs are growing increasingly agitated. Internal communications from the Parliamentary Labour Party show fractures forming across ideological lines. Moderate MPs worry about the damage to Labour's electability, especially in marginal Brexit voting constituencies. Left-wing MPs are fuming over being kept in the dark. A motion for an emergency party meeting has reportedly gained significant support, with whispers that a leadership challenge is no longer just hypothetical, it's imminent. Some MPs have even spoken with the press off record, suggesting that if Starmer refuses to take full responsibility and step down, they may walk across the aisle or resign altogether. The very unity Starmer once claimed to have restored within Labour is now rapidly disintegrating. Compounding the chaos, media outlets are starting to unearth more documents and correspondence. One internal note circulated among civil servants chillingly reads, "All Brexit reversals must be framed as domestic modernisations. Avoid any language indicating EU compliance." This kind of linguistic manipulation shows how far the government was willing to go to deceive not just Parliament, but the public at large. It also confirms that this was not an accidental blunder, but a carefully orchestrated campaign, executed with precision and concealment. Legal experts warn that while the Supreme Court ruling halts the current legislative measures, it doesn't undo the bureaucratic groundwork that's already been laid. Multiple statutory instruments, secondary legislation that doesn't require full parliamentary approval, have already been passed in recent months under vague titles like Standards Alignment Act and Regulatory Efficiency Bill. These seemingly benign laws may contain clauses that subtly reintroduce EU regulatory mechanisms. Unless these are repealed, Britain remains in a precarious position, vulnerable to further backdoor integration. With every new revelation, the pressure cooker tightens around Keir Starmer. His carefully constructed image as a competent, rule-following leader is being shredded by the hour. In its place stands a man now accused of engineering the very undoing of the democratic will he once vowed to honour. And as more MPs, judges, civil servants and voters join the chorus of outrage, the question is no longer whether Starmer will survive, but when the final blow will land. Britain nexus on the edge of a historic turning point, and your voice has never mattered more. The Supreme Court has spoken, but now it's time for the people to act. If you believe in democracy, transparency, and the right to determine your nation's future without backroom deals or political betrayal, then make your stand. Share this video to spread the truth that the mainstream media refuses to tell. Demand answers from your MP, speak out on social media, and support the parties and leaders who are fighting to protect Britain's sovereignty. This isn't just about one man or one party. It's about defending the will of the people. The time to stay silent has passed. The time to act is now.